Hi everyone, I'm Daniela, and this is the Translation Podcast, a space where we can learn, share, and grow together. Please subscribe and like the show. It will help me grow. Hi everyone, this is the Translation Podcast, a virtual place where translators, interpreters, and language professionals come online and meet my guests. If you aren't subscribed yet and you haven't seen the previous episodes from this season and the previous season, please go back and check them out. I have great content. And speaking of which, today we decided to do a special episode that talks about the life of a PhD researcher and a PhD candidate, an honest conversation between me and Keith. And before we dive straight in, let me first introduce you, Keith. Keith Wagner is from Denver, Colorado, in the United States. His work background includes translation and various roles in localization companies. He has a bachelor's in modern languages and a master's in French. His working languages are English, French, Italian, and Romanian. Keith is currently a PhD candidate in comparative literature at the University of Texas at Austin, where he also serves as assistant instructor of French. Keith conducts research on Francophone literature, literary multilingualism, and translation. His doctoral thesis looks at a century of Francophone writing from Romania in order to comment on issues of modernization, Europeanization, and Orientalism. Thanks for joining this episode, Keith.
So happy to be here. Hello.
Amazing. I think many people will find it very interesting. And today I'm going to talk about my PhD journey as well for the first time on my podcast. Those of you who have been listening to this podcast might also know me as the founder of the translation company DGB Romanian Translation Services. So as the name says, I'm a Romanian sworn translator and interpreter for English, French, and Spanish. I am sworn by the Romanian Ministry of Justice and registered at the Romanian Embassy in London, England, where I currently live. I hold a BA and MA in Translation and Conference Interpreting, and I am a PhD researcher in my second year only in Computational Linguistics and Translation Studies, in a joint supervision between the University of Bucharest and Université Bourgogne-Europe in Dijon, France. So my work centers on the performance of small language models trained for medical translation, and more specifically on the translation of medical diagnostics. So today you'll hear us have an honest conversation about the realities of doing a PhD later in life while working, managing health, and navigating uncertainty. Rather than focusing on expert advice, the discussion will center on lessons learned, challenges, and reframing expectations. What do you think, Keith? Shall we kick it off?
Yes, let's go. Allons-y.
Allons-y. So, Keith, what motivated you to pursue a PhD at this stage in your life rather than immediately after your previous studies?
Yes, so I started the PhD at 28, so it hadn't been too long, but still some time in between. So after I had finished my bachelor's degree, I was in a full-time work role for almost 2 years, and I think I just started to get the itch of wanting to be more in a world of ideas and things like that. I hadn't really given a thought to researching many graduate programs because I was focused on growing in maybe a postgraduate corporate job role. But I think I got bored with that. And I'm more just like just a type of person that really wants to think about things, engage in in-depth conversations, help people to learn. I was realizing that in my job role in a localization company, it was really enjoyable to teach people about the technologies, teach people about the behavior of different languages so that we could get our technology to work with different ones. And so I think I just, there was a temptation to be doing something different than serving kind of business interests, even though I was working with language. Yes. So, yeah, so I also a big thing for starting the PhD of where I was at that point in life. I had relocated to Texas, so I was living in my home state of Colorado, and then I came here to Austin, Texas, where I am, and so that put me near a very large research university with lots of resources. So what I did, I actually took a bit of a bargain because I just applied to the program here at University of Texas at Austin. Not doing the traditional route of grad students applying for, they'll choose several different programs and options in different locations and apply to them, but I really just went for one. And also I ultimately met with a professor at University of Texas at Austin in the French program where I did a master's, and then I did a PhD. My PhD is in a sister discipline, comparative literature. So I met with that professor, and up to that point, I had been thinking of taking an extra year before applying, but then it didn't seem so hard after meeting with someone, once it became just not just facts on paper and that sort of a thing. When I was making that people connection with people at the university, it just seemed more doable. So I think that's what I don't want to say convinced me, but those were some factors in thinking that I could do this and I could make this change from being working in life and not being fresh out of 22 years old and fresh out of my first degree. And I did specifically discuss that aspect, like that I was a little older and had been discuss that with professors beforehand, so they were able to share with me what they had seen with students on the maybe non-traditional path, even though I feel like I see a lot of people, in their 30s, 40s, further on pursuing graduate degrees these days.
I love that. Thanks for answering, Keith. And there are so many things to unpack there. Just to move from one state to another is very interesting. Can be an interesting journey. I know that for you actually love being in Texas. So you.
I do miss what I do miss is snow. I'm not in. Yes, I'm in my home Colorado, but. Yeah.
I know we all miss home, so
I can make do. Yes.
I see. I see. Okay, and before I answer this question as well, because I haven't mentioned this, so we'll do a format today where we're gonna answer the same question to see different perspectives and different journeys in our PhD course. I just wanted to ask you, Keith, can you give our listeners an overview of your thesis? And we've done a previous episode, but I'd love if you could speak about your choice of subject, and if you can speak also about your passion for Romanian literature.
Yes. So I think getting to this place with working on Romania, it all started with curiosity in authors who wrote in French and were from Romania, and I just started to find more and more examples and started to study their lives and things like that. So in the beginning, some of the first, like the things that inspired me first, or the first examples of Francophone writers from Romania were Mircea Eliade, Emil Cioran. So I began to look into their lives, and I wanted to see what their relationship was with language, just how they felt about writing in a language other than their mother tongue, and if there were any affordances. I think Emile Choran is a very good example of finding a new creativity, finding a new expressivity in a non-native language. So I think that the aspect of translingual writing, so writing in a secondary language, was really interesting to me, just having thought about bilingualism, multilingualism for a long time. And I was really only looking for the expression of that bilingual, multilingual identity within French. But as I went on a little further, I'm not sure exactly what point it became like clear to me that I would be able to understand things in a much richer way if I knew Romanian as well, to or had some understanding of the Romanian language, to see what the context was that people were coming from, to consult writings that were only in Romanian, some things that weren't translated, some things by the same authors, to sort of compare those voices. So that brought me to pursuing Romanian language courses. We were able to make that happen within my master's and PhD journey at the university here in Texas. And also, I did a few different summers of Romanian study, one domestic here in the US, and then also in Iași and Bucharest. And so just going to Romania really, or learning the language and being able to get further in the country and to understand more of it, just it drew me in even more. And it sort of became a side obsession too, where it wasn't always Romania being tied to my research topic. It was just this curiosity of a new language and culture and all of these things. I don't know how far to go. It's too much. So as far as how things turned into the thesis topic I have, what it's really about, or what I didn't say in the little synopsis I gave you, is there are 3 main chapters aside from an introduction and conclusion, and each chapter is centered around one personality, one writer. So it's I talk about it in the broad conception of it, but I'm really just seeing where French language was used in Romania. My period starts in 1850, so really after the 1848 revolution, when Romanians were bringing lots of political ideas from Paris directly and really were engaging with that model. So I'm looking at French coming into Romania for the reason of sort of inspiration for democracy and creating a nation. This is 1850, and Romania wasn't a nation until 1877, 78. So it was very budding at that time. Sorry, I don't want to get too far into the historical parts of this. But so I start with that in the first chapter. So I'm actually looking at some French people using French in Bucharest that were sort of press magnates. Ulysse de Marcillac and Frédéric Damé, they had newspapers in French in Bucharest that were very thriving in the 19th century. And then my second and third chapters are each dedicated to women writers. So one is Marta Bibescu. She was born into elite circles in Romania and eventually forced to leave the country. So her relationship with French before she left Romania, and it's a lifelong relationship, is really interesting. And sort of her just embodying the multiculturality of Europe. And then my third author, Sorana Gurian, has a very different path as a born Jewish woman from not the area of Bucharest, from Bessarabia, so region that's was went back and forth between Russian and Romanian powers at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. And so there's some Slavic identification, but ultimately the use of French when this woman was sort of attacked for expressing certain political opinions in the budding totalitarian regime of the late 1940s in Romania. So it's interesting that she wrote an account of her escape from Bucharest completely in French. So the way that an audience can be engaged with, and this is over this 100 years and even longer, I think is just an interesting, lesser known thing. This is what makes Romania a very interesting case as a Francophone country, and we don't tend to see it represented in Francophone literature. This is why I wanted to do this dissertation and this study, at least in English-speaking literature. This has been covered by certain, very well by certain Romanian and French researchers, but I wanted to just pull this into sort of an orientation toward teaching and understanding the French-speaking world, because I aim to continue teaching French that's called global French, so kind of wherever French exists in the world, and not centering it in Paris, but sort of seeing these different cases that pop up through history and the different potentialities of the French language. I just want to present Romania as one of those cases, which is it's quite different than say colonial situations like in Polynesia or North Africa.
I love that. I love that you've said so many things that I resonate with, and I like to say that we're Francophone by choice, and the Francophonie is such a big part of Romania of today as well. And you're spot on. So it started in the mid 17th century, right? So the mid 40s, we had
18th century, 1780s, yeah.
Exactly, when we had the revolution, and it was just how to say, just for background, it was like a return to the origins, because we were, back then Romania was so torn between different empires. We weren't a state. Every region was under a different rule. The only region that was remained Romania was the south part of the. Yeah, so I resonate with a lot of things that you said, Keith. And yeah, we're Francophone by choice. What I like to call Francophone by choice, because to the period that you've referred, so around 1848, when we had the Romanian Revolution, or the first revolution in 48, Romania was split up in different regions that were under different empires. So only the south part of Romania was actually Romania, because they were rich enough in cereals and other crops that they were paying taxes to the Turkish people. But yeah, there was always being Francophone was always by choice, because we resonated with the Latin part of Europe, and because we are the only country in Eastern Europe speaking vulgar Latin mixed with different other languages, depending on what regions and what people conquered us. Being Francophone was such an important thing for us, and we pride ourselves in remaining Francophone until today. So that is why I think particularly your work in an Anglophone context is really important, so that people throughout the world understand our heritage, because there is often the misconception that Romania is still Slavic country. We speak a Slavic language and so on, which is of course not the case. So that is really interesting. And yeah, our authors working in French, there are so many. The list is so long, from the 18th century up to the 20th century and up to today. So there are still writers, Romanian writers who write in French. So that is super interesting. So yeah, and for me it's kind of a similar journey. I did start a PhD after the university, but I had some hurdles down the line. I wasn't resonating with my subject at the same time. I was doing something like really deep in linguistics, even though I'm a translator and I've been focusing on translation studies, but it was not that. I think it was more the bureaucracy, as you know, in Romania, that sometimes kills kills your soul. But yeah, here I am. Yeah, kills your soul, right? And that's where I am today, doing a thesis that I'm really passionate about. So combining both, the computational field, so IT field, technology, translation, also specialized translation, and I'm referring to the medical translation. So medical translation is a field that I've specialized really early on. I was really lucky to do one internship while I was still doing my BA in France. So I've worked at a translation agency in France where they were doing patents and medical translation. Wow. So that is how I started up, and I found that really, really interesting. And yeah, I always wanted to see how we can blend nowadays training, what we call small language models, meaning the language models that we can train based on our corpus of text and glossaries, and it's much easier to work with, is much more specialized than the generalist modules. So yeah, that's where I am. So I just got started. I got started 2 years ago, but I'm just in the middle of the research. I just fine-tuned my topic, and yeah, I've spent some time in France as well, in the university, which has been a great experience. Going back to the roots, and going back to my francophone background, because French is my second language. So I've done all my studies in French since I was 5. It's quite funny how I ended up living in England, being so curious about French culture. But I do go to France every year, at least once, just to feed my hunger for French culture. So yeah, okay. So I wanted to ask you a question around how has your perception of doctoral research changed since you first started your PhD journey?
Yes. So, and I'll disclose that it's been 7 years since I started the PhD journey. A master's was sort of worked into that. So, yes. So since that time, a lot has changed. In the beginning of my journey, I might have perceived doctoral students as more fully formed in their research specializations. Like they seemed like everyone just had it together. I didn't see the struggle that everyone probably goes through to find a fit for research based on the relationships you form with professors and colleagues, what you discover through courses and conferences, and just in sum, the effect of time. I think this sort of ties back to what you were saying, Daniela, or a thought that I had about your path with starting PhD many years ago, but coming back to this more exact fit of a topic that to pursue this topic really on the cutting edge. It didn't exist at the time before. Sometimes the world changes and suddenly there are things that make us things more appropriate for us or not. So I think just the summative effect of time, of going through those experiences, to learn how to specialize something, and to accept that your research ideas will not be fully formed within with at least with US PhDs that are at least like 5 or 6 years. Within those first 2 years, you probably won't have an idea. So I think that you need several years of working through things to form a certain maturity around like whether you really think this should be your topic, or just to do the ins and outs of the pros and cons and everything, so that you know what you can and can't do, and you know where and how to position yourself. But yeah, that all takes time. I think that was my misperception, that I thought that all PhD students just connected with a mentor and went through things, but that's not the case.
Okay, so we were just talking about the how the perception changed from the moment we started the PhD until now. And you said something that really resonated with me when you mentioned the fact that we thought that PhD students got it all together. They had a plan from day one and they kept, working at it. But it's not like that. And actually going through a PhD once, and in Europe, besides the UK. So in the UK, the PhDs are very similar with the ones in the US. So you do like a full-time PhD in 7 or 8 years, which is, to be honest, now that I've, gone through one and I'm halfway through the second, that's a more realistic time frame than doing it in 3 or 4 years, as we do it in the other universities in Europe. You get an extension, you get a 2 years extension, but a lot of the PhD students either drop out because they feel that they're not doing enough, or they haven't got at that core of their research and they give up, or they strain themselves to prolong their PhD with 2 more years, which is unfunded. So that is really
Right.
difficult, and funding is a totally different topic we can discuss. But hey, if you are considering doing a PhD, or if you are doing a PhD, uh, and you don't have everything figured out, nor do we. So, and we're
Right.
almost, Keith is almost presenting his PhD. I'm halfway through, so it's completely normal. And it is really intense. In my experience, it's really important, and you mentioned this, Keith, as well, who you're working with. So who's your supervisor, your professor, how much they support you. And it is really important to kind of try to always chase them and to be on top of everything, because otherwise you could easily end up like in my situation. I was already in the fourth year and I didn't get too much from my professor, which put me in a very dangerous position. So I had to redo everything all over again some years afterwards. So yeah, indeed. And it was many years after, because there was no other French supervisor for many, many years in the University of Bucharest, for me to continue my studies. But everything happens for a reason, and there is no age for doing a PhD. There are people doing their PhDs in their 20s, people doing it, as you said, in their 40s. So there is really no time for it. It's more about your motivation and why you want to do it, what motivates you to do it, and that should be your end goal. So only your internal motivation, and that's just seeing, or having in mind the light at the end of the tunnel is so important. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
So Keith, many people imagine PhD students as having unlimited time to focus on research. We talked about this in our prep call. How different has the reality been for you?
So, I will say that that in all honesty, there have been times over the past 7 years doing my master's and PhD, when I have had all the time I wanted, within a day, a week, to do research. But I was really at a loss to fill it. So I really don't think it's ideal to have too much time, because it's just unstructured, and that's one of the big tasks of how you learn to know yourself better, and how you conduct research over the degree, is to be able to put structure to your time. I would say that I prefer to have a few regular things on the schedule. So I haven't been teaching a French course every single semester, but I do prefer those semesters when I am, because it forces me to show up to some things sometimes of the week, and it really makes me cherish the additional time that I have to dedicate toward research. But of course, it's when it gets the most frustrating is when you do have an idea or a starting point for a project, but you know that you need to put lots and lots of hours, dozens and dozens into it, and you can't find the time that you'd like to have to sort of string that along. I think a good example for me has been conference papers. So conference papers are like this. I get very excited about a topic when I write an abstract and apply and get that acceptance to the conference, and then you have this gap of several months in between most of the time, and then suddenly the conference is coming up in a month, and there's a rush to the. So I find there's always a rush to the finish prepping for a conference, as they're usually during the semester when I'm also teaching, and you just have to accept that a conference presentation will be as finished as it is at that moment. It might never be really polished, but that's not really the point of what you need to present at a conference. It's about showing up and engaging with a colloquium of ideas. But I think that's where I continue to get short-sighted of like, oh, I have lots of time for this, but it's really about I guess the quality over quantity axiom of if you can really get in quality work time within constrained times. But I think having more time to put that research into, if you're a very, very organized person, that may work well. But for me, it's better to be working with a few things, because it also, I think, gives your brain a break and helps it kind of descramble things when you're doing something else.
No, absolutely. I resonate with a lot of things you said, and first of all, I have to say, I've never seen a presentation at a conference that was like so absolutely perfect and so on. That doesn't exist. That's a myth. I don't think anyone, not even the tenured professors, have time to work on those.
If we can
Secondly, I
just begin with that understanding of, yes, it's not going to be perfection, and that's fine.
exactly. So, and I've also seen professors giving the same, absolutely the same conference and this using the same slides all over again. So yes, they had time to perfect those slides. So let's not hold, each other accountable to a standard that is not simply not there. So let's be realistic, and I think it's more about being there, being present, and presenting to the best of your abilities. We're never perfect, and I think that's not the topic of conferences in general, but it is quite a stressful task of PhD students. I don't know how it is in the States. In Romania and in France, we need to have at least 5 participation to conferences throughout these 3 or 4 years, and to have 2 published articles in a reputable journal. So I don't know how it is in the US. I'm not familiar with the UK system either.
Yeah, I haven't heard of like a quota for conference presentations, because that can be difficult between programs based on funding too. It's hard to, get the plane ticket and hotel in another city, let alone the conference thing. So I haven't seen necessarily that as a requirement, or actually I have specific funding packages are tied to, like, if we fund this research project, you will present it at a thing. But yes, there is very much that pressure to publish. I think that's more, when we think about it in the US, that's more about when you're going onto the job market. So to be considered for any academic position after you've earned the degree, if you don't have probably about three is what I hear most often, publications to your name, you're really not going to be favored. So there are these sort of unspoken rules that because they're not part of the degree requirements in the US, but they're really good things to have for establishing a career, at least an academic one. It takes a lot of kind of talking with your peers and checking in every year with those people going up for the job market to see what's expected. Because that's really, I think those are really when the requirements reveal themselves of the job position you want to get, not the criteria for finishing the degree within an institution. Yeah.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely that is more favorable for you to have written papers. I think at least in Romania and in France, you need to have a couple of published articles to actually qualify for the title of PhD candidate. So you won't get to that score. There is a score, so they count a lot of activities like your PhD courses that you followed, your grades. We generally have courses in the first year, and then you're focused on your research. So yeah, that's another thing. But I totally understand it. I mean, it makes sense to me because if you're a researcher, you have to write about your work. I mean, people need to know about it, but also it's great for you. It's like a great prize, you can be so proud of your work when you are published in an article. It doesn't matter what kind of article or what kind of magazine or journal it is rewarding to see your work there, and it kind of pushes you a bit further in your study, so that you just don't just scratch the surface, but you go a bit deeper, and it forces you to kind of read the literature that is in your field, and that is one of the requirements that is needed, right? So when you present your topic, when you defend your thesis, first of all, you need to be really up to speed and up to date with everything that is happening in your tiny space. So at least in France and in Romania, they ask a lot of questions when you defend your thesis, maybe not even so much on your paper, but also on basically, yeah, the field that you study. So they want to make sure that you're up to date. And you've touched upon another aspect that I think is another myth around PhD students, that we write all the time and reread all the time. And I totally relate to what you said, Keith. I mean, even if I consider myself to be an organized person, I cannot work constantly. I really relate to what you said. My brain needs different activities. I cannot focus on the same repetitive task all over again. And I find myself, and maybe those who listen to us who would resonate with it, I work better when I have a constrained time space to do that. I know that I have a deadline, I have a target, I work better against that. But I also try not to put too much pressure on me. So I try to plan, in advance these time limits, and to make sure that I honor my commitments to myself. And we talked about it in the pre call
Yeah.
preparation for this episode. But a piece of advice that I would have, and I'll pass the ball to you, Keith, is, plan your activities really early on. I mean, after the initial first year, if you do 3 or 4 years, or if you do 7 or 8 years, really make sure that you don't leave the bulk of your work for the last year, because the last year it's such a big administrative strain, that you have so many admin things that you need to do. You need to prep for your thesis. You need to, at least in Europe, you have to get reviews, like peer reviews from other people, and just so much. So you don't want to be stressed out that you haven't actually finished your paper. So plan everything if you can in the 50% of your time, and then have enough time to trim it down. And we'll talk about this as well, that you will get a lot of content that will not be used. So be prepared to live with that you will work on some stuff that will not be used, and towards the end you need to make some really conscious decisions on what you include. So prepare. Don't be surprised during the last year or so. What is your view, Keith?
Right. Well, a very specific idea connected to that of things that not everything will be used. You can always keep a separate file open, a dump file, we call it. I don't particularly love the word, but you can keep writing that you've had to edit out, so that, it might be useful in the future, or at least maybe just putting it there makes you feel better. Maybe you won't use it. So that's something that I've heard of, things for, if you articulate something well, but it just doesn't fit the current project. And what else was I going to say? Oh, yes, as far as pursuing the activities earlier on in the degree, definitely. So in US PhDs, we might have 2 or more years of coursework. So you can start out, like, ease yourself into it depending on if you have, enough of a funding situation, if you don't have to dedicate your time to other things to just provide. So yes, I would say to aim for conference attendance and presentation in those first years, because it does feel like it's just it's taking up time that you could better use doing other things when you're further along. So the what we've said, the stage I'm in, candidacy, where I'm permitted to write a dissertation versus being a PhD student before you're a candidate. That's the time when you're not expected to be focusing on your dissertation. So, and probably don't even have it planned. But yeah, definitely, I'd say there's also benefit in pursuing those conferences earlier on, because it can give you new ideas and help you take new directions. So that's much better before you have to. That's much better to do before you have to learn to present yourself as a specialist in a given field. As you were saying, Daniela, knowing the state of the field, being able to articulate that is one of the most important things for definitely for professors and committees to have the confidence in letting you finish a doctoral degree. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. And now let's talk a bit about the one of the things we don't often talk about, or at least I don't know, the content that I've been seeing hasn't talked about this, about mental health and how difficult it is actually to pursue a PhD. So I know, probably those of you who have been, listening about doing a PhD, you've came across this, but I think, both of us have experienced periods of burnout, low motivation. I think all of us, busy periods, or simply feeling stuck. I think this is more real than we would like to acknowledge. And how do you think, Keith, we recognize when we're entering one of these phases, and how can we mitigate these? Hi there, it's Daniela. I'm just jumping in for a moment to remind you to subscribe and like the Translation Podcast. Your support helps more people discover the show and keeps this content available for our community. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I think I recognize I'm going into burnout when I'm just turning to bad habits, with, I mean, food or caffeine, or just getting away from the very basic things. And I think I find myself craving, like, just a normal full night of sleep, or, like, some, I don't know, homemade meal or something. That's how I start to see. And I wouldn't say that I'm super successful at just listening to those sort of bodily instincts and doing it. But that is what I can recommend everyone else is to just pare back and concentrate on the basics of you need to still do your laundry and have good nutritious food and sleep enough for anything to function. The brain is what you need more than anything to do this work. And so you can't just expect to starve your brain of sleep or nutrition or water, hydration, and think that you're going to get through it. That's really, yeah, that push of the burnout. And I think also just maybe irritability, just a mood change too, when you're just not happy about things, you start getting pessimistic. Then you really owe it to yourself to pull away. And for me, I talk about cooking a meal because that's something that brings me out of my head into my physical body, just chopping vegetables, that kind of thing, sensory experiences. But for different people, it could be, taking a walk or just doing something to get yourself out of your head. You could do handwork, crafts, also, yeah. So that's what I think. Burnout is really when you're just doing too much in your head. I mean, also you're talking about low motivation, so that's when there's not enough. But again, stimulating your brain in a different way by doing something physical rather than just thinking can maybe kickstart some new idea process.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I totally relate to that. And I was really surprised that in France, instead of having a check-in with your committee, with your scientific committee, where you present, like in Romania, you present, a chunk of your work and you get feedback and so on. In France, they've completely removed this, and they have a check-in for your mental health. So they're asking you actually how you're feeling, how are you collaborating with your supervisor, how are things, do you feel supported? And I feel that is absolutely amazing. I
That's amazing and extremely rare. I think that's the important thing is, yeah, your mental health quality will drop the first, and PhDs are so isolating that we're not really not certainly not reflecting to ourselves, but when we reflect that to other people, then it really you see the state of distress you may be in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and seek help, I think for me, and again, maybe this might be specific to my first PhD. I'm also noticing it a little right now, especially with the Romanian committee and professors and so on. Please, don't feel that all the work needs to be on you. Your supervisor or your professor needs to help you, needs to guide you, and you don't need to work independently and kind of bang your head against the wall. So it's in their role and responsibilities to help you with that, right? So that is what they are paid for. That is why, they're also accompanying you in this journey. It's not you struggling on your own. So have a honest conversation with them, with the approach that, you want to take. But have an honest conversation. It can take you a long way. And it will for sure take a burden off your shoulders. So don't feel that you need to carry this weight on your own. So I know that we don't talk about it, at least too extensively in Europe. So there is a certain, respect and deference to the supervisors that work with you. However, please keep in mind it's not just you. So it's a joint. This is why it's called the supervision, right? The joint supervision. It's a team. It's teamwork basically. It's not only you. It's your professor as well. So you need to talk to them.
Right. Yeah, sometimes yes, I totally resonate like of maybe hesitating to reach out to sometimes we forget that oftentimes the professors see PhD students as sort of junior colleagues and somewhat on the same level, so it's they're not expecting to have that same hierarchy over you as the undergraduate degree students and like it's I think it's out of respect that they allow you to approach them, but oftentimes we can tell ourselves that it's too trivial what we need, answers on. But no, yeah, definitely reach out because that's how you show that you're willing to become a peer, a colleague amongst the other scholars. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay, what have you learned about balancing academic work, professional responsibilities, and personal well-being?
Yeah, so I guess related to burnout, the opinion I've come to is it's not worth the sacrifice of personal well-being to overdo academic work. Yeah, I think sometimes you can put a lot of time into something that does not pay off, and it really takes from you. So professional responsibilities may call for you to show up more often. So you do need to conserve a certain amount of energy for that. If you need to show up to teach in a classroom or do something with a work that you have, you definitely have to give enough time for that. But when it comes to academic work, I think I'm reiterating you're using your mind and you need a well-running brain to do that. So sleep hygiene, nutrition to not run your nervous system ragged because I think maybe we often are already at a lower functioning point as a result of burnout before we realize that we're there. And so, yeah, it's once you know that you're in a burnout state, like things are already kind of not functioning optimally. So you really want to um, slow down. I guess some of it is that. Yeah.
Yeah, take a break. Your brain needs a your brain needs a break. I totally relate to that. And I please, for those of you who are listening, please don't take me as an example because I'm the worst example of having a full-time job, doing a PhD, doing some translation work aside. But for me, it works. This is how I work. I've always been over functioning. If you were to ask my mom, I've always had, multiple passions at the same time and doing them all. But yeah, I do take breaks. I do take breaks. I, always compartmentalize how I work. So I don't, because once I start to mix them, it's done. Like I can be burnt out in one day. It happened to me more than once. But I do take time to recharge. Like during the weekends, I never work. I never do things for my PhD. I just, relax and try to keep my brain balanced. But there is no recipe for, all of us. Each of us, we know our limits, and we have to your point, Keith, really protect our brain and our physical and emotional well-being. So it's all about anticipating. You said that really well. So it's all about anticipating and taking a break. And again, being honest about it. So if you need to push back on some things, for instance, like at the beginning of the year, we were asked to create a lot of articles, to present to a lot of conferences. Push back if you're not comfortable with it, right? Nobody will ever say at the end of the year, "Oh, Keith, you've pushed back on I don't know how many assignments." No, you
Mm.
have to plan your year carefully. And I'm sure in most of the universities it's not the case, but feel free to push back. At the end of the day, you can always say, I'm at this stage where I'm working on this portion of my, on this chapter. I need to focus on this. So don't worry about saying no to the benefits of your thesis, because at the end of the day, it's that paper that counts the most. And of course, we talked about presentations, we talked about articles, but they all can come in due time.
Yes, that's great advice. I have to confess that I overcommitted myself in my first years of the PhD. It was like I thought it would help me to get some extra work experience. I was working under a professor that needed just help with curriculum development, but it took up much more of my time than I was effectively transcribing audio from videos for new curriculum that was not just France French, but Quebec French, Caribbean French, and that takes a lot of time. So if I could have just said, as Daniela, you're recommending, this will take much more time than I have, and that you're paying me for, in that case, then I would have saved myself a headache, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, this is great advice after I said yes so many times as well. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a great example of me saying yes at the beginning of the year, on so many things and not seeing my articles published. So how is that? So that is another thing. So you have
Mhm.
to prepare yourself for doing work that might never materialize. So that is why I'm saying, ask
Yeah.
for multiple clarifications. What is it needed for, how long it would take, and so on and so forth. But you got the gist of it. Yeah, so we talked about productivity in a PhD. And we talked about this in our call before we went live today. Let's talk a little bit about what progress looks like when you're deep in a research project. And another myth that you have to write every day or write every month. Sometimes the research work is so much, so important and can actually bring you to a much important point in your research.
Yes, I still think that I'm a bit new at trying to strike the balance, being in the dissertation writing stage of when to go to research. I do that more often. I'm more often reading than I'm writing, but yes, it does require a different way of looking at just a basic way of not considering productivity as meaning more output, more words on the page. Sometimes the work requires you to think through the same thing in a deeper way or from a new perspective, and that becomes productive, even if it doesn't result in, more words on a page, more output. I think one thing I could think of when I was thinking over this question, as far as measuring progress and feel like you've done something productive, is also how you use advising sessions with supervisors, with professors. We often choose, in my experience at least, what we want to bring up to our advisors. And supervisors, and I think over time we grow in the ways we expect that conversation to go. So it's not that we should feel dependent on a supervisor's feedback, because there can be long periods of just no communication that happens. But the progress lies in you as the researcher, always maintaining some fuel to your fire. So perhaps looking back over old ideas, or by doing some reading driven by your own curiosity, just to keep the cogs turning, to keep, I don't know, keeping fresh with the state of the field, by doing that. So yeah, so I think there is productivity in sort of seeing. You have to kind of look at it over years. I think I would be able to look at, like, I prepare like a page of notes before advising sessions, so I would be able to look at those and see over time. So I guess my real recommendation is to, after a while, maybe look back at something, like look at yourself in a more amateur stage, to then feel more capable of where you are. And so that means you have made a productive use of your time, or something has resulted, but it's not necessarily cramming the work in. And I think something to remember also in research degree, just the etymology of research, and French, you feel it much closer, of rechercher, is to go and look for things, is to that you're training yourself in how to find information. So don't discount all those different hours you spend on different databases, working through libraries, doing things to just train yourself in more efficient ways to look for and find information, because that's what should be one of the results of a PhD too, is just being a very versatile researcher, finder of things. Remember, as a researcher, that's what you're a seeker. Yeah.
A seeker. I love that. No, absolutely, absolutely. I resonate with a lot of things that you said, Keith. And I think, you know, when you get to that stage of being a PhD candidate, no matter if you started your work 8 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, you have to be an expert on your field. So don't think that the research that you've done 1 year, 2 years ago is the final stage. So if I can give you a piece of advice from all the conversations I've been having with my professors, and just reading things online, right, on PhDs, is be always up to date with your field up to the moment where you defend your thesis, because they can ask you questions that you would not, expect, or you would not expect coming. So because being a researcher means that you're an expert in your field, but at the same time, feel also very comfortable to say that, hey, my research, it's only comprising this little space, and it can be continued with more research or a postdoc or some other programs you can access. So be prepared. That's what I am trying to say, and you've stated it very, very well, Keith. So be up to date with the state of your field. And at the same time, there is no golden rule or on how you should write a PhD. So you can start with the research chapter. You can start in the middle. Like me, I'm doing a PhD on applied linguistics. So it's actually advisable to start with the with the analysis, right, of your text, of your corpus, or in my case with the training of the small language models, with analyzing the corpus before and after. While there are different approaches. Like in Romania, they have been pushing me to write my first chapter on the research, while in France, my French supervisor was saying, I totally relate to what you're saying, Daniela. How can you choose what methodology you want to pick if you don't know what text you have and what the output would be, right? So there is no golden rule. So work with your professors, write any chunk, start anywhere, and the things will flow from there. And on the actual research, so now it's not like it was 10 years, 15 years ago, when we had to be in the library, buy books, ask our friends to buy books from France or from Romania, or ship them books to us.
Yes.
Nowadays you can find so many things online, and there are so many tools, like tools that can help you find synergies between documents, that are based on research and AI. Not saying that you should write with AI, that's not what I mean, but you can find connecting papers on so many tools, and I'm gonna add a few in the YouTube description, because that has helped me a lot. At least in my space, there are papers coming out every minute probably, so I couldn't be up to date with everything that is ongoing. So use the technology that you have at your disposal to find that research. Now we can use, tools to help us summarize, to find those paragraphs that we need. So it's easier to make the connections. So yeah, using technology. Okay. Looking back, Keith, what is one research mistake or misconception that cost you the most time?
So yeah, what I thought of is how working in archives has been a slow learning curve for me. I look at a lot of physical materials from 19th and early 20th century. So I was started this with going to a campus archive here, but my first few visits to that reading room, maybe the name just influenced me, but I spent a lot of time reading directly from historical materials, which meant that if I had 2 hours there, I really wouldn't cover much ground. Yeah, what I learned first is it can take several hours to decipher different people's handwriting, paleography it's called. So that's a whole process of being able to read what you have in front of you if it's handwritten. That can be difficult. But I was realizing I was spending my reading time doing that deciphering, and also just slowly reading to find if things were significant, and kind of completely ignoring the fact that cell phones and cameras and devices for photography were allowed in the archive. I was even watching people in the reading room taking lots of pictures, not really understanding why they were doing that. But now most of the reading and analysis I do of those materials will happen at home. When I'm in an archive, that's the time to photograph the things. It's just sort of data collection, because I found photographing an old letter, for example, will allow you to, with a digital image, zoom in as much as you need, and adjust brightness, so you can really have more flexibility with the material once digitized than in person. You know, you can't get that close to it, or sometimes have to use gloves. Just sort of seeing the actual archive visit as a data collection phase. I think if I like sort of put my thinking into more streamlined vocabulary, I think what you were referring to with your discipline of linguistics, and the sort of different phases of research and experiments. Yeah, I think that that we could look at I could look at archives as this sort of data collection, and also I'm sure use many digital tools that I'm not familiar with at this moment to help start to decipher the handwriting. Yeah, to if I were to prepare a digitized an image of text, and feed it through maybe an OCR, or feed it through different tools. If it can read it well enough, then analysis can be done. I've started to brainstorm that with we have a research librarian for my area, European Studies, who's very good with those digital tools, analysis tools. So maybe I can have a bit easier way of specifically reading like 19th century texts from Romania. They're in different scripts, sometimes the transition alphabet, so that can be tricky. So if I can have something else doing the reading for me, yeah, I think that's just, I guess the research mistakes are, yeah, find where your shortcuts are. And like if you take a lot of images in the archive, you need to know how to find what you took. So having a naming convention for your files, so that they're findable, to set yourself up in the future. Think about yourself in the future when you're in the weeds of collecting data or collecting research articles and things. Remember that you will need a way to find that more quickly later on. So I think just trying to think ahead, trying to like think that you want to help yourself out in the future when some idea comes up that you have stashed away somewhere. Yeah.
So relatable, so relatable. I don't know how many articles I've had to rename recently, just because when I saved them, I just saved them with the title that they had. So I had no idea what what every article was talking about. So only that took me forever. So totally, absolutely. And nowadays, I think that there are more and more digitalized archives, which is really nice. By the way, depending on what language you do your research in, there's so many international archives. You just pay like a subscription, maybe like a yearly fee to the libraries or to those universities, and they can give you the digitalized copy. Like for instance, the French National Library has digitized almost the entire library, and their subscription is only 50 euros per year, and you can access almost anything. So it's worth checking
Yeah, it's
for
an
any.
amazing site, Gallica. I was
Yes,
just pulling things a few days ago from that.
yes,
Yes.
yes, exactly, exactly. So I know that the dream of at least all the PhD students in humanities is to read all the books ever written, which will never happen, but we can, at least they're there, right? So it's comforting to know that, hey, at least there's a database, and if we'll ever have the time, we can always read. Um,
Yes, because it feels difficult to do all the reading we want to in the degree, but I always hear professors saying, "I wish I had taken the time I had in grad school to do the reading." What?
Exactly. Reading is the most important part. Yeah, and to answer this question myself, I'm gonna ask the next question because my answer is related to this as well. So, how important it is to narrow the scope of a dissertation, and why is that often harder than it sounds? So, for me, this is what cost me the most of my time initially, and I think we can all relate to this when our scope is too broad or we want to do too much, we want to accomplish too much, then we read too much, we maybe write too much, or we just get into the weeds. And my advice is really trim your topic down, because the dissertation, at least in Europe, is a 300, maximum 300 pages thesis. More likely it's like 200 pages, and there is like really no time and no space for you to write like hundreds and hundreds of pages. The more you write, the more you're gonna get into the weeds of it. So use the time you have with your supervisor, with your professor, to help you trim the topic, and take some decisions, as I said, in the first 2 years, to quickly make the change, and to focus only on what's important and what's the most impactful. It is really important to know what questions your thesis is answering, and only focus on those. And ideally, there should be only maximum 3 or 4. So don't chew, right? Don't bite more than you can chew. I think that's an American expression that you guys like a lot.
Yes, biting off more than you can chew.
That's
Absolutely.
right. What is your view on it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think to narrow the scope, or I agree with everything. So to not give oneself too much to do, too much work, yeah, with narrowing the scope. And I really couldn't see it. I felt like I was blind to what was dissertation worthy and wasn't, but it was that back and forth process with an advisor. I went through a long period, probably over 6 months to a year, submitting proposed dissertation outlines, and an advisor always replied that this could be several different dissertations. So, yeah, so because I was trying to cover too many historical periods and maybe do the in-depth background, and when this is not a work of a historian, so it wasn't appropriate, or taking too many disparate angles of analysis. So now that you were just saying, Daniela, figure out what question you're trying to answer. I think that's the best approach. That's what's helped me, is getting that sort of that statement directed at me too, of what is your research question, what are your research questions, so that they're sufficiently narrow, and yeah, only answering one to two to three, because you really will just give yourself more to more to do. And there's the, as you were mentioning, Danielle, the literature review, the doing the research on everything that's happened in the field before. There's like a constant contextualizing, so that will add work along the way that you don't think about. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And every question that your thesis raises is a question that you need to defend. So you'll need to structure the answers to that. So to your point, it can probably be 2 or 3 dissertations. So consult yourself with your supervisor. They would be in the best position to help.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I wanted to ask you, so in the States, do you only have one professor, or do you have a committee like we have in Europe? So we have
It's
multiple advisors that meet with you maybe once a year, and they give you some feedback.
Yeah, it's a committee. So generally, I would say probably an average of 4 members.
Okay,
And
awesome.
so in my case, and then you have a chair. So kind of that's your main supervisor, and they can make decisions for how things will be delegated within among the committee too. So that's sort of my situation, where I have 2 co-chairs, so that things kind of filter through. But in earlier stages, I've been working with these committee members longer than just the dissertation phase. So, yes, our what we have in my PhD program, our requirement of a comprehensive exam. I was meeting individually with each of them, so that at least established the conversation, and now I have an idea of where pieces of writing should go. But it's really my chair that makes decisions, which I'm glad. It's too much for me to think of having different conversations with three or four different people, and just my program in general, comparative literature. We all work with three languages, and we're often having one faculty member represent like one national literature and another. So we do have to do a lot of cross explaining because we don't have the same background knowledge among the committee members and experts that we have. Yeah. Especially, I need to explain a lot about Romania, to all of my committee members. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Um, right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process itself. Um, did you notice a difference between communicating someone else's ideas and developing your own academic voice?
Yes, I do notice a bit of a difference. I think there's just more freedom when I'm speaking in my own voice. So I think I'm a lot freer with vocabulary choices and things like that versus when the stakes are higher, when it feels like you're reporting someone else's ideas. I feel like I have the responsibility of me understanding it, but also making my reader understand it better. So there are just there are just more like I guess checks and balances in the communicating someone else's ideas versus my own voice. But I'm not really sure yet that I've found a voice that like as we talked about publications earlier, I have one, and I think that whole editing process brought the work out in a very new way and didn't necessarily feel like my voice. So I think you learn not just in academic publication, but with getting revisions on dissertation items from professors and stuff. I guess maybe that's it. What I didn't expect is that the academic voice I would be building is that entire conversation with other people, giving me their suggestions and edits. It feels like sort of it's taken away from yourself, but you know that it's a better product in the end. Yeah.
I love that. For me, it's the other way around, actually. So I don't know if this is because I'm doing a thesis in linguistics, and if those of you who are listening who've read, articles on applied linguistics or computational linguistics, oh my God, it's such a high bar to raise up to. And also because I'm writing my thesis and my articles in French, so which is my second language, but I haven't been using actively French in more than 10 years, right? So it is an exercise, it is a practice. But it's not that comes, easily back for me, but just writing in a academic voice,
That
it's difficult. It's definitely
French
difficult.
academic style is, I read it all the time, and I sort of lose the person because we have that royal we also, and it's like c'est nous, c'est qui, c'est une personne.
Exactly. Yeah, and not only that, I think the entire vocabulary, the structure, the syntax, everything is so different, and it is a different state of mind. Like for instance, when I am writing chapters of my thesis, to your point, it's a bit more relaxed because it's, I feel like I'm using my voice more or
Mhm.
less. But when I have to write articles, I'm like imagining that, I don't know, what professor is reading it, so I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's probably because it's just my second year, and I've been writing my first two articles and so on. But it is complicated, so it is not easy. And the way that I do it, so I read a lot. So I read a lot of articles, I read a lot of other PhD thesis, just to get myself in that rhythm, and to make sure
Mhm.
that I use the same voice. But it is for sure not easy. And it is create what I call a creative technical process. So it's not that straightforward.
Yes.
We talked about this. So we talked about AI tools, digital databases, and new research platforms. So as I said, I'm gonna add a few to in the video description. If you want to test them again, I've been testing these in a linguistics landscape. I'm sure there are so many out there. We've actually had we had a course on digital tools and digital databases in France. So we have a lot of online courses. So that's the one that I've enjoyed the most because I learned about so many tools that I had no idea about. How is it for you, Keith?
I don't think I've discovered any of those things in coursework. Maybe just from fellow students, but it is, it's different in the literature field, very
Yes.
traditional humanities, where yeah, kind of that slow form of reading seems favored, so it's less analysis. But yeah, it can really be helpful with. I had a friend who she's finished her PhD in French and who would use a lot of the analytic tools on using a literary text as a corpus, use analytic tools for like word frequencies and things like that. So I think it's useful when we know about different modes of reading, if you will, so that like we're, as the human, as the researcher, is going to read the text in a certain way and maybe be able to take things in a more, with sentimental depth and that human element. But, when you find tools that can do a specific type of reading, like, sorting words, making, what are those called? Word clouds and things like that. Uh, then those can be helpful. It's just realizing whether we want to do that type of reading. Uh, right. Like if I could think of and brainstorm an idea, it's because I do research on historical Bucharest. I would love to take chunks of digitized texts and see what descriptors the city has. So I've seen some very talented researchers in Romanian universities doing that, but I am not quite up to speed on working with the tech in that way. And it's more about file prep, I would say, what you can stick through a machine. But that can all be learned from peers and stuff. I think it's really great to be inspired by other people. You're really lucky that you had that course though on the digital techniques. Yeah, occasionally we have workshops given by the library and the research librarians in my university, which are helpful in that way.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And again, literature is a whole different field, and I miss it actually. I miss going in a library and reading and taking notes on my little notebook, like
Yeah.
physical notebook, yeah, not even laptop. So I still have them with me. But yeah, there are so many tools. The great tools about the digital world is that you can always find manuals, you can find YouTube videos about everything. So yeah, I'm the same. I'm at the stage where I have to analyze my corpus and where I'm learning different tools. I have no idea how to use them, so it's a fun little journey to go through. And yeah, you touched an important point. So ask someone. Don't lose your time like hours and hours of trying the wrong tools and installing the wrong programs and so on. Ask someone who's
Yeah,
been
no,
doing this for a
the
while.
commons, yeah, the greater generalized commons of, there are people out there who have struggled to try the same things you're trying probably already. So there's a lot to be learned by asking.
True. And if there's no one, by any means, you can look it up online because
Yeah,
now everything is online. So even AI summaries of what you need to do, so you no longer need to go through different links. Okay, so let's wrap it up, Keith, with three quick questions.
okay.
And we'll take turns, and let's keep it to short answers. What
Yeah.
do you wish someone had told you before you started your PhD?
I wish someone had told me not to get ahead of myself. I was trying to match more advanced students than myself in the beginning and thinking about attending conferences and publishing, but and finding mentors, all of that. But I really just needed to take a breath and slow down. Those things come along with time.
So to trust the process.
Yes, trust the process. How many times have I heard that in these years? So much.
I know it's hard to do. I know it's hard to do. I love that. And for me, I think is trusting in your topic and kind of sticking to it. So not changing your mind with different approaches. Maybe sometimes even, if someone like, someone from your committee might not, fully agree with it. But if you truly believe in your topic, in your research, don't don't back out. Just try to find out the middle ground, try to get coaching on how you could go by it. Of course, if it's completely out of reach, that's something else. But yeah, I mean, if you are really passionate about a topic, you'll find a way to work on that, and that works for me at the moment really well, because I'm finally working on a topic that is that I'm passionate about. While it was not, the same during my first PhD, so I don't feel that I was doing that, with all my heart.
Mm.
A second question, Keith. So, what has the PhD taught you about yourself beyond the research topic itself?
Right. So I think the PhD has given me confidence in my connections with people. So in relating to different people in different ways, I've seen myself in a new light. So with now classroom instruction experience, I've got some confidence in like being the person that holds the authority or the knowledge there. To kind of see I have gotten somewhere I can teach people. But then as a researcher, being a junior colleague to my professors, I think I've already mentioned this, having that peer relationship as I grow, as the journey goes on, like growing from being in a more of an apprentice situation than a peer. And also just having confidence to reach out to international colleagues with less and less fear over time. Something you were just talking about, Daniela, of sticking to having sticking with your topic and being ready to defend it. I think if you're not finding support right away, but you've seen stuff in current scholarship or recent scholarship, don't hesitate to email that person that you saw it. Maybe you won't get a reply, but maybe you will form a connection. It's always very interesting these days that when we attach email addresses to publications, what kind of responses we get. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. And even reaching out to people that you meet at conferences, professors and so on, you'd be surprised how open they are, even to give you a piece of feedback, or maybe you want to clarify something or ask a question, or it sparked some curiosity. Yeah, I think they're very open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I don't think I can answer this question just yet, because I'm, midway through my, at least my first 4 years. No, I'm joking. I hope that I'll be able to finish it in 2 or 3 years. But yeah, I mean, for me, like honestly, I really feel proud of myself that I'm giving a second try, and I know that I'm, late in my 30s already. But yeah, for me, it's important is the one thing, we always, ask people, what's your one regret in life? I mean, this was mine, that I haven't finished my PhD, and because I also want to have a second career, I finally want to maybe get involved in academia, or be involved somehow in coaching other translators, and being involved in technology. And for me, it's important. It's for myself. I'm doing it for myself, and I think it's my dream to finally to get to that point where I'm getting my degree. But more than that, you've mentioned this, Keith. It's about the process. I'm really enjoying the process this time, so I don't feel stressed about it. I don't feel overwhelmed. I'm enjoying the process.
Mhm.
And the last question. So, if you could go back to the beginning, to your beginning, what would you do differently?
I would say I would ask more questions, and keep more of an open mind about making changes when things don't seem like a good fit. So yeah, I've found that university faculty are available and willing to help, but they can't read your mind. So there are a couple of if we want to go with idiomatic expressions, a couple of things I've like held close to me over the years is closed mouths don't get fed. And also the squeaky wheel gets the grease of like if you don't express to someone that you're having a problem with stuff, they'll never know. And I think that a lot of my struggle went on in silence in the beginning. And once I finally reached out to professors, they were kind of shocked in certain instances of why I didn't reach out sooner. So, just don't be afraid of things. Don't think that you need to solve everything yourself. I think maybe that's what I thought, because early on I wasn't getting as much help from peers. They all had more experience in graduate school, and yeah. So just to speak up, yeah.
I love that. I love that you've said so many things that I resonate with. Speaking up, being, bold, asking questions, you know, being open and asking for advice, for help when you're stuck, but also when you don't know which direction to go. So I totally, absolutely, totally relate to that. And I would just add one more. I've said this, but really trust yourself and trust your instincts in your research. Follow the course that you want to follow as closely as you can, and trust yourself up to the day you have to defend your thesis, because it's your work, and you shouldn't be how to say, you shouldn't be overwhelmed about that. You shouldn't worry about it. It's your work, it's your point of view, because at the end of the day, what's a PhD thesis? It's a point of view, right, of someone. It's not the ultimate truth. It's not the holy grail of your field. It's your ideas that you defend. It's the questions that you've asked yourself initially, and defending them until the end. And yeah, it's only an opener, right? Okay, so a
Yeah.
PhD is only an opener for your career, for what you want to do next. And it's just day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I love this conversation, Kit. Thank you so much. I think we've gone really, really deep. I hope those of you who are listening found this insightful and useful. We've tried to give you some advice. Again, this is very personal advice. Please, leave us some comments in the comment section wherever you're listening to this podcast, and let us know how you felt it went, or if you have any additional questions. Both me and Keith, we are available. I'm gonna add Keith's socials as well. So if you wanna reach out, or maybe you're in the States, maybe you're in the same town, right, in Austin, and you wanna, who knows, maybe people will reach out and meet you for coffee, or the
Yeah,
same
let
if
me
you're in
know.
London, or if you wanna do a group session, just to catch up and to have coffee, let us know. Or we can also do a virtual catch up. We hope this was useful. Keith, thank you once again for your time. We had a little technical glitch, which I'm going to solve. So the final output might look a bit different than the first 10 minutes, at least from my wallpaper point of view. But it's the conversation that is the most important.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to get to talk about these things with you.
Thank you, Keith, one more time.
Thank you.